Today's episode contains a very brief mention of addiction and suicide. So if you are sensitive to this content, please listen at your own discretion.
What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together, we will appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna.
As Cinderella once sang, "Have faith in your dreams and someday your rainbow will come smiling through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep believing, the dream that you wish will come true." Just like Cinderella rose from rags to riches, by virtue of her pure heart, belief in her own potential, natural beauty, and the help of her Prince Charming, our protagonist today rose from the most desperate of situations, defying all odds, to become the most famous woman in pre-Victorian England. Listeners, today I introduce you to Lady Emma Hamilton, whose real-life rags-to-riches story makes Cinderella's pale in comparison. Born into severe poverty, Emma Hamilton worked her way to eventually become England's first female celebrity. Her life story is so unfathomable that it almost sounds like a riveting work of fiction. In it, we are taken to the filthy streets of London's back alleys, to England's fashionable countryside, to the dazzling courts of Naples. Emma's path crossed with some of the greatest names of 18th century history, from George Romney and Joshua Reynolds, to General Horatio Nelson, to even Marie Antoinette. It is a tale of hope, grandeur, everlasting love, and devastating heartbreak. So how did a raggedy girl destined for ruin carve her way into the heart of England's consciousness and become a national icon? Born into squalor, Emma traveled on her own from the small mining village of Hardin to London at the mere age of 12. Here she worked her way from maid to theater assistant to prostitute and mistress to a number of wealthy men. After becoming pregnant and abandoned by her first protector, Emma was eventually taken under the wings of Charles Greville, the son of the Earl of Warwick. Greville not only took care of Emma, but saw an opportunity to profit off her natural beauty by sending her to model for the fashionable portrait painter George Romney. It was the perfect arrangement. Romney had been looking for his next muse, and Greville could make an extra buck off a cut of the sale of Emma's portraits. It didn't take long for Emma to become Romney's most beloved model. Romney was utterly infatuated with Emma, painting and sketching her hundreds of times. In fact, Romney painted Emma so many times that she became the most painted woman in all of Europe. And Emma was no passive model. She actively participated in Romney's creative process. A natural performer, Emma had an endless supply of theatrical poses and versatile expressions, and helped Romney craft his compositions. Emma and Romney's artistic collaboration proved to be one of the most successful partnerships in the history of England, and there is no doubt that Romney's best work includes Emma's image. Romney would eventually introduce Emma to other famed artists like Joshua Reynolds, Angelica Kaufman, and Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun, whom Emma also modeled for. When Greville could no longer take care of Emma, he arranged for her to be sent to Naples, under the care of his uncle, Sir William Hamilton, the British ambassador to the Neapolitan court. Keeping Emma in the dark, she believed she was going to Naples for a short trip, and was heartbroken to learn that Greville had given her up. But always one to make the best of even the most humiliating of situations, Emma grew to love Sir William, whom she married in 1791. Emma also climbed to the highest ranks of the Neapolitan royal court, befriending Queen Maria Carolina, and eventually became her closest confidant. And perhaps most famously, she won the heart of Admirable Lord Horatio Nelson, the man who successfully defeated Napoleon. When Nelson arrived in Naples to aid in the defense against the French, he fell madly in love with Emma, and the two embarked on one of the steamiest love affairs in European history. If this wasn't shocking enough, Emma not only had her husband's green light to embark on the affair, but went on to openly live with both Nelson and Sir William in the same house, in one of the strangest ménage-à-trois relationships the world had ever seen. But just like Cinderella, Emma's destiny was in the hands of the men she depended on. When Sir William died of old age and Lord Nelson was tragically lost in the famous Battle of Trafalgar, Emma's life took a dark turn. Her story has no fairy tale ending, and Emma died at the age of 49, impoverished and forgotten. Unable to survive without her Prince Charmings, Emma eventually fell to the societal constraints of pre-Victorian England, which denied her the independence, respect, and support she so desired and deserved. Today, we hope to restore Emma's honor and salute her immense legacy as one of the most beautiful, driven, confident, and fearless women of all of history. So without further ado, let's dive in. Amy Lyon, later Emma Hamilton, was born on April 26, 1765, in the village of Ness on England's northwest coast. Emma was born into extreme poverty. Ness, an industrial village centered on the coal industry, was notorious for its squalid and miserable conditions. Emma's mother, Mary Kidd, was born in the nearby village of Hardin, to humble beginnings. As a young woman, she moved to Ness to join her brother, who was working in the coal mines. Though Ness was far from a picturesque town, for the young Mary, the move was a welcomed adventure. Fun-loving, jubilant, and naturally very pretty, Mary quickly became the belle of the town, and soon after met Emma's father, the tall, dark, and handsome Henry Lyon. Emma's father, Henry Lyon, was working as a blacksmith in Nell's coal mines. It was an extremely dangerous and labor-intensive job. But to Mary, perhaps with rose-colored glasses on, Henry had an air of independence and success, and seemed like he could provide her with a better life. We do not know the exact circumstances of their meeting, but their courtship was extremely quick, and in less than 2 months after beginning their affair, they planned for marriage. Historians have assumed that their speedy nuptial was likely due to the fact that Mary was already pregnant with their first child. Mary and Henry were married on June 11, 1764. Both illiterate, they signed their names on their marriage certificate with an X. Soon after the wedding, Mary was in for a rude awakening from her fairy tale aspirations. Having come to Ness for a promising new beginning, Mary was devastated to find married life filled with poverty, unhappiness, and backbreaking labor. She moved in with Henry into a miner's cottage. Her days started at 4 a.m. when she woke to prepare Henry's breakfast. When he left for work an hour later, she spent the rest of the day scrubbing away the never-ending supply of grime that floated in from the coal mines. When Henry returned from work, he often drank himself into a stupor and would lash out at Mary in angry fits. It was in this unhappy household that Emma Hamilton was born. Originally named Amy after Mary's sister, Emma was baptized on May 12, 1765, in a local church. Mary worried that her precious baby would have to endure a life of squalor and pain. It wasn't unusual for children to begin work at the mere age of 10, often performing cheap labor jobs. Emma's life was destined for hardship, exhaustive work, loveless marriage, and an early death. But little did Mary know, Emma's destiny couldn't be further from this bleak reality. The first incident that took baby Emma's life off course was the sudden death of her father, just a few months after her birth. The circumstances surrounding his death remain a secret that Emma took to her grave. Emma never mentioned her father in her adult life, and there's reason to believe that his death was marked with scandal. Though it was quite common for men working in the mines to succumb to respiratory diseases like tuberculosis, these illnesses very rarely resulted in such a sudden death. And while men often fell to fatal injuries at the mines, there is no record of Mary receiving a pension from Henry's employer, which was standard practice at the time. His death records do not indicate any cause of death either. Many historians suggest that Henry may have drank himself to death. Others that Henry may have taken his own life, desperate to escape his exhaustive job and depressing life at home. As suicide was considered a sin, this could explain why his cause of death was kept hush-hush. But what if it was something far more nefarious? Might Mary, protective of her new baby, have taken action against her abusive husband? Could it have been an act of revenge? A fight that turned fatal? Whatever the cause of Henry's death, Mary quickly took Emma back with her to Hardin, never to return to Ness again. They moved back in with Mary's mother in her childhood home. Mary's family, with little money to spare, had to accommodate mother and baby in their already overcrowded and run-down cottage. It is here where Emma spent the next 12 years of her life. At the time, Hardin was amongst the poorest areas in all of England, and Emma would have lived amongst beggars, criminals, prostitutes, and all sorts of unsavory characters. There is no doubt that the young Emma would have been forced to grow up extremely quickly. As a child, Emma would have been expected to help with household chores, like fetching water, cooking, and cleaning. Too poor to get a proper education, Emma would not have been taught to read and write at an early age. But though her childhood was marked with severe poverty, Emma still managed to enjoy warm memories. She grew particularly close to her grandmother, riding in the back of her grandmother's cart as she delivered coal to neighboring villages. What she may have lacked in material wealth, her grandmother made up for with her unconditional love and kindness. This may have been why, despite her poverty-stricken beginnings, Emma was a spirited young girl. She often referred to herself as a child as wild and thoughtless, and never let even the most devastating of circumstances stop her from daydreaming of a more glamorous life. She loved to stand on the side of the road and watch wealthy coaches drive by, imagining that one day she could enjoy such a luxury. She made a promise to herself to do whatever she needed to do to escape the dismal future of a laborer's wife. A naturally ambitious young girl, she craved a life of fame and grandeur. While Emma's grandmother became primary caretaker, Emma's mother seems to have embarked on a series of affairs. One in particular, with a wealthy man from London, was able to send money towards Emma's care and education. With his help, Emma was eventually taught to read and write, the first of her family to become literate. This allowance also afforded Emma a more nutritious diet, sparing her from the potato-heavy diet typical of the laboring classes. Though a naturally very beautiful girl, with sparkling blue eyes and a dazzling smile, her healthy diet helped her long chestnut hair have a particular shine, her teeth remain strong and white, and her body grow tall and shapely. Though Mary was able to spare her from the worst of poverty, Emma was still expected to get a job as early as the age of 12. Her mother had moved to London with one of her lovers, and as she grew, her grandmother found it harder and harder to take proper care of Emma. In June of 1777, Emma was sent to work as a housemaid for a reputable surgeon in Hardin. The job was unpaid, and Emma was given only room and board for compensation. As a young maid, she would have been at the very bottom of the hierarchy of houseworkers, and given the most laborious tasks, such as hauling coal, splitting firewood, and cleaning chamber pots. Emma, always with her head in the clouds, hated this first job, and tried her hardest to fail. It seemed she was successful, because she was dismissed only after a few months. Emma wanted a brighter life for herself, and after being fired from her first job, she made the brave decision to travel to London all on her own. It is almost unfathomable to imagine the 12-year-old Emma boarding a rickety wooden wagon for the big city, with barely a few cents to her name. The journey to London was grueling, and depending on traffic, could take up to 9 days. How did Emma feel as she stepped off the wagon into the bustling and grimy streets of London? Was she excited for her fresh start, hopeful that better days were ahead? Or was she terrified that she had left all that she had ever known behind? Could she have imagined that one day she would be known and beloved by the entire city? We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. At the time, London was the biggest city in the world. It was also the dirtiest city in the world, with skies thick with smog and streets covered in piles of mud. It was far from scenic. But to Emma, we can imagine that it felt alive with potential. Upon her arrival, Emma secured a position as a housemaid for a middle-class family. Young girls were often hired by scouters looking for cheap labor as soon as they exited the wagon. And this is likely how Emma was hired. Emma was brought to a home in Chatham Place, where she was once again paid in room and board. Here as well, Emma would have been tasked with the most laborious chores, working long and exhausting days. It didn't take long for her to become disillusioned with life as a domestic servant. Luckily for Emma, she wasn't the only young maid dreaming of brighter days ahead. She quickly befriended another young and ambitious servant named Jane Powell. Emma and Jane soon became inseparable and spent every down moment they had dreaming of stardom. They had a particular fascination with the stage and pledged to become famous actresses. As they scrubbed the floors, they would secretly rehearse famous monologues with each other, and their relationship sparked Emma's lifelong passion for performance. Desperate for some fun, Emma and Jane snuck out at night to explore London's nightlife. Unfortunately, they were eventually caught, and Emma was fired on the spot. Emma and Jane would meet again 30 years later, and Jane did eventually become an accomplished stage actress. Upon being fired, Emma strutted right to the theater district in Covent Garden to look for a job on the stage. Though only 13, Emma was full of confidence and belief in herself. But even with her spirited drive, her chances of becoming an actress were near to nothing. While waiting in line to audition, Emma was approached by the wardrobe mistress and offered a job as her errand girl. Knowing this was her best option, Emma happily accepted. As an errand girl, Emma helped fit actresses in the dressing room. Before performances, she could be found bustling backstage, distributing costumes and props. She watched from the wings as the stage came to life each night, her eyes bulging with excitement. Unfortunately, Emma's time in the theater was short-lived, as the wardrobe mistress let her go after just one season. It wouldn't, however, be the end of Emma's interest in performance, and her time in the theater left an indelible impact on her. Having already survived 18 months in the unforgiving city of London on her own, Emma had to find a new way to survive. Without a job or any connections to get a new one, Emma had few options. Shortly after being released from the theater, Emma was spotted on the streets of Drury Lane, an area known for prostitution. It wasn't all that uncommon for girls her age to resort to prostitution. In fact, 1 in 8 women in London worked as a prostitute, and nearly all of them were young and new to London. These girls, like Emma, had few other opportunities, lacking the resources to be trained in other fields. How did Emma feel as she wandered the streets late at night, hungry and alone? Was she terrified? Or did she hold her head high as she did what she could to survive? Did she whisper to herself words of encouragement and perseverance? To look the part, Emma coated her face in lead-based white paint and rouged her cheeks. She attached herself to a tavern that would have given her some protection and provided a room to conduct her business for a cut of her profits. Her clients would have largely been of the working class, like laborers and servants. But historians have speculated that it was during her time as a tavern girl that Emma also began to first catch the eyes of artists. Many artists cruised these taverns looking for models, and Emma had the exact looks that artists sought out. Tall, with billowing chestnut hair, milky skin, feminine curves, and a perfectly oval face, Emma embodied pre-Victorian England's beauty standards. There are surviving newspaper reports that suggest that Emma may have modeled at the Royal Academy of Art. It has also been proposed that Emma modeled for famed portrait painters Joshua Reynolds and George Romney as early as this time, as a few of the female figures in their works from these years bear Emma's likeness. Though her days as Romney's muse were still years ahead, it is quite remarkable that at just 14 years old, Emma was already capturing the attention of the greatest artists of her day. In the early months of 1779, Emma left her life as a tavern girl behind to pursue a unique opportunity. James Graham, London's first celebrity doctor, was looking for young women to work in his Temple of Health, a townhouse he rented to give nightly lectures and sell his gimmicky medical hacks for sexual impotence and infertility. Later outed as a quack, Graham claimed he could cure illnesses with electrical shocks and had a special bed that helped impregnate barren women. His lectures often consisted of theatrical elements, like smoke and sparklers, meant to wow his audience. To pull it all off, he needed young women to lure in crowds by dancing in his performances and demonstrating his medical advice. Emma worked as one of these dancers, dubbed the Goddesses of Health, fluttering on stage as Graham gave his lectures, and waltzing around the celestial bed meant to boost fertility. Though Emma almost certainly rolled her eyes at how ridiculous her job was, it was a step up from a tavern girl, and she would have been provided room and board in the townhouse. It was also a valuable opportunity for Emma to improve her performance skills, learning how to dance, sing, and act more professionally. And the Temple of Health also gave Emma direct access to London's elite. Attracting the city's creme de la creme, Emma would have seen society women, ambassadors, and even princes amongst Graham's crowds. And they would have noticed Emma too. It was said that of all the goddesses of health, Emma stood out as particularly alluring and attractive. Artist Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, who Emma would pose for many years later, was one of these attendees. She noted that Emma attracted the curious. Artists were particularly charmed by her. By that late spring, Emma once again moved on to a new venture, ending her short but impactful time at the Temple of Health. It seems that Emma left at the right time. Graham, who exploited men and women with the most vulnerable of health issues, was eventually arrested for debt. He died soon after, impoverished and insane. Luckily, Emma was on to bigger and better things. She brokered her way into the most glamorous brothel in London. Madame Kelly's brothel in Piccadilly attracted the city's most powerful men as clients. Many acclaimed actresses jump-started their careers by being one of Madame Kelly's girls. And for Emma, it was the door she needed to gain access to London's high society. Emma's arrival at Madame Kelly's house was announced with an advertisement in Town and Country magazine, dubbing her Miss Lion. Though only 14, Madame Kelly had high hopes that Emma would soon become one of the most celebrated demi-reps in town. Working with Madame Kelly was a major upgrade from her days as a tavern girl. Located on the prestigious Arlington Street, Madame Kelly's house was furnished with pieces fine enough for a palace. Emma would have been given lavish dresses and expensive jewelry to wear, a taste of the luxury she had always dreamed of. Madame Kelly brought in tutors to teach her girls foreign languages, music, and dance, furthering Emma's education. And perhaps most importantly, Emma would have been trained in the useful art of feigning interest in men, knowing how to read her clients' needs and pleasing them accordingly. This skill would certainly serve Emma for the rest of her life. It was through her job with Madame Kelly that Emma was able to win herself a protector. It didn't take long for Sir Harry Featherstone-a-Hugh, a spoiled but very wealthy bachelor, to become infatuated with her. Sir Harry hired Emma to come to his country home as entertainment for a stag do. What started as a wild weekend soon turned to several months, and Emma was eventually situated in his country home as his permanent mistress. Here she was expected to entertain guests, and of course keep Sir Harry happy in the bedroom. The job had many perks. Not only did he pay Emma a high salary, but the country estate was the most beautiful home Emma had ever stepped foot in. Located on luscious land, Emma could see wild foxes trotting past her window and breathe in fresh air. The house was attended by over 100 servants, and Emma even had her own maid. She was served impressive meals, given stylish clothes, and she had her own living quarters. Just a year prior, Emma had been scouring London's back alleys. Now she was living a new life of luxury in England's fashionable countryside. But the job could be extremely lonely. Sir Harry was often called to London, and even when in the country, he spent most of his time on hunting escapades with his friends. Emma had learned at a young age how to rely on herself for both company and emotional security. But a natural romantic, she longed for a man who would spend more time with her. On these lonely afternoons, Emma began to befriend a man named Charles Greville, the son of the Earl of Warwick, and one of Sir Harry's oldest acquaintances. Almost twice her age, extremely shy, and not very attractive, he wasn't the Prince Charming of storybooks. But he went out of his way to keep Emma company, and took an interest in her happiness. While Sir Harry and his lads went on their hunting sprees, Greville stayed behind to spend time with Emma. She started to greatly look forward to his company, and their relationship began to border flirtatious. But by the summer of 1781, Emma had much bigger concerns than loneliness. She had stopped menstruating, and she knew she had become pregnant with Sir Harry's child. At first she was in denial, and hid her situation from Sir Harry for as long as she could. She wasn't sure how Sir Harry would respond. She hoped that it might encourage him to look after Emma long term, or even to marry her. But when she finally told Sir Harry the truth, he grew furious, accusing her of trying to entrap him. He ordered Emma to immediately pack up her belongings and leave, swearing to never speak to her again. She hoped that Sir Harry would change his mind, sending him letters begging him to forgive her, but to no avail. We can only imagine the heartbreak Emma must have felt, not only losing the place she had called home, but the man she had called protector, whose child was now growing in her womb in such a sudden and cruel way. Emma was only 16 years old, pregnant, and once again in an impoverished and desperate situation. With few allies, she wrote to the one man who had shown her kindness, Charles Greville. In a surviving letter, Emma begged Greville, "What else am I but a girl in distress? In real distress, for God's sakes. Write me the minute you get this and tell me what I have to do. Direct me in some way. Oh, for God's sake, tell me what is to become of me." Greville did eventually agree to help Emma, but not without a list of terms and conditions. In Greville's own words, "If you mean to have my protection, I must first know from you that you are clear of every connection, and that you will never take them again without my consent. You should part with your maid and take another name. I will get you a new set of acquaintances, and by keeping your own secret, and nobody about you having it in their power to betray you, I may expect to see you respected and admired." In short, Greville wanted Emma all to himself. He not only asked Emma to cut ties with other male relations, but also her friends, and even her maid. Greville wanted all traces of Emma's previous life erased. She could only make new acquaintances with his permission, and would have to keep her pregnancy and past a secret. Finding herself in a desperate situation, Emma had no choice but to meet Greville's demands. She needed money, protection, and a place to safely birth her child. She rode out the final weeks of her pregnancy in a lying-in house, out of the public's eye. We can only imagine how terrified Emma must have been. At just 17 years old, alone and at the whim of a man who wanted her to sever ties with everyone she knew, Emma faced childbirth in isolation. At the time, childbearing was no small feat. 1 in 10 women died in childbirth, and there was no anesthesia to numb the pain. Fortunately, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she also named Emma. But now under Greville's protection, Emma had to immediately give up her child to a wet nurse and return to Greville in London. Baby Emma was soon after sent to Emma's grandmother in Hardin, and Emma was strongly discouraged from visiting her. How did Emma feel, having to give her daughter away only moments after her birth? Was she heartbroken over how desperate her situation had become? Was she furious with Greville, who cruelly separated her from her own child? Or was Emma willing to make a sacrifice as great as forgoing raising her daughter to secure her own survival? Though well situated, Greville was not particularly in the position to take on a mistress. But Emma had won his affections, and he took it upon himself to care for her. He rented Emma a small home in a rural area just outside of London, and set out to shape her into a lady he deemed more respectable. He changed her name from Amy Lyon to Emma Hart, and sought to, in Greville's own words, turn the wild Emma submissive and penitent. He began to control every aspect of Emma's life: how she dressed, who she interacted with, where she went, and even what she ate. He supplied Emma with modest dresses in subdued colors, many commenting that she looked like a nun. Emma spent most of her days isolated at home, improving her reading and musical skills, and trying to make her accent sound more posh. Greville would visit her every evening to supervise her improvements. Though concerning by our standards, Emma was happy to play the part of Greville's penitent mistress, and it was not without its perks. To start, Greville was the son of the Earl of Warwick, which meant that Emma was now under the protection of one of England's most influential families. Greville also allowed Emma's mother to join her as an unpaid housekeeper. Though it must have been undeniably strange to accept her mother as a maid, it meant that mother and daughter could now be reunited, and that her mother could also benefit from Emma's new position. Emma wanted to make the most of her situation. She focused her efforts on improving her singing and dancing skills, learning the art of being a hostess, and enjoying the perks of living outside the city. Greville was pleased to see that Emma was making great strides of improvement. In a letter to a friend, he wrote that Emma prides herself on the neatness of her person and the good order of her house. She has vanity and likes admiration, but she connects it so much with her desire of appearing prudent. But it seems that Emma had more motivation than just her survival to follow Greville's strict way of life. As time went on, and as Emma spent more and more time with him, she began to develop deeper feelings for Greville. She saw his control over her as a form of affection, and appreciated his sense of humor and generous heart. She wanted to please Greville and become a woman he deemed respectable enough to settle down with. Though Greville seemed to have a genuine affection for Emma as well, he didn't hesitate to think of ways to profit off her unusually good looks. Greville was aware that the prominent portrait painter George Romney had been searching for his next muse. Knowing that Emma had a once-in-a-century elegance, he devised a plan to introduce Emma to Romney as a model, asking that he in return receive a cut of the profits from any sales. Romney, who was already 50 years old and well into his career, had long been uninspired. He was looking for a model with a timeless beauty who could energize his works with a breath of fresh air. In March of 1782, Greville brought Emma to Romney's studio to sit for a painting. Though Romney likely first met Emma during her early years as a tavern girl, he was not at all prepared to see such a breathtaking beauty walk through his studio doors. How did Emma feel as she entered the artist's bustling studio? Could she believe that she was about to sit for London's famed painter of the stars? Was she nervous, or was she ready for her chance at the spotlight? Wearing a crimson dress and her best smile, Emma sat herself in the chair across from Romney. At just 17 years old, Emma was ready for her big break. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. We know from first-hand accounts that Emma was nervous and stilted in these beginning moments posing. Her smile looked strained and her eyes glistened with fear. Luckily, Romney's studio dog, a spunky little spaniel, jumped into Emma's lap and snuggled his way into her arms. The spaniel's active affection warmed Emma's heart and gave her the reassurance she needed to fall into a relaxed pose. We see Emma in this first sitting in a painting titled Lady Hamilton as Nature. Here Emma coyly turns to the viewer, her hair seemingly swept up in a gentle wind. She cradles Romney's dog, her right hand grazing his neck as he stares at us candidly. Her cherry-colored dress matches her perfectly rouged cheeks, and her eyes glisten with the innocence of youth. She smiles at us, flirtatiously, with an infectious energy that makes us smile in return. Emma radiates youthful play and irresistible sweetness. Though Emma had already endured so much in her young life, Romney's painting feels like a clean slate, her way of embracing her own fresh start. Lady Hamilton as Nature was an instant success, and it quickly became Romney's most popular painting. Patrons clamored to call this work their own, but Greville preferred to buy this first painting himself, proud that Emma had done so well. The painting was thereafter reproduced as a print and widely distributed around England. Soon, Emma's face could be found in shop windows all across London, and hundreds of copies sold. Greville had grossly underestimated just how popular Emma would become. Overnight, she was a sensation. It didn't take long for Emma to become Romney's most beloved model. She soon frequented his studio, sitting for Romney over 20 times in a matter of a few months. Emma, hungry for fame, Greville, hungry for cash, and Romney, hungry for recognition, made the partnership between Emma and Romney a win-win for everyone. And Emma proved to be an extremely skilled model. Her natural talent as a performer made her poses both versatile and full of life. Romney was greatly impressed by how freely Emma moved and how many guises she could so effortlessly imitate. Over the next few months, Romney transformed Emma into a number of different figures, from goddesses to heroines to allegories. With each work, Emma reinvented her own image, skillfully crafting herself into different characters with a rare authenticity. As a friend later wrote to Emma, "You were not only his model, but his inspirer. He owed you a great deal of his felicity as a painter to the intelligence with which you used to animate his diffident and tremulous spirit to the grandest efforts of art." As Romney and Emma trusted each other more and more as co-collaborators, they began to speak a language of their own and understand each other as creatives on the deepest of levels. As author Kate Williams wrote, Emma's acute awareness of the effect of her own image gave her an instinctive understanding of Romney's ambitions. These works made in their first few years together are bursting with spontaneity, experimentation, and simply pulse with life. We will only explore a few of these works in our episode today, but we have included a full list of Romney's paintings of Emma on the ArtMuse website and highly encourage you to take a look at the sheer volume and versatility of these works. One of the most iconic works from this period is a painting titled Circe. Painted in 1782, we see a life-sized Emma in the guise of the Greek goddess. Known for her ability to cast spells, Circe could transform her enemies into wild animals with a wave of her wand. Here we see Emma in a flowing pink dress stepping forward out of darkness. She defiantly holds her hand high in a warning position, halting us in our tracks. In the other hand is a long wand, reminding us that at any moment she can cast her spell. She stares at us with warning eyes, letting us know that she is prepared to defend herself. Behind her, a wolf snarls, perhaps her protector, perhaps an enemy that has crossed her path and met his fate. Emma as Circe is almighty, the embodiment of female power. Painted the same year, we find Emma again in a spunky portrait titled Emma Hart in a Straw Hat. Here we see Emma as herself, fashioned in a large black sun hat. She stares at us confidently, unafraid to meet our gaze. She rests her chin on her hand as if she's checking us out to see if we're worth her time. Her long chestnut hair flows out from under her hat. She is clearly very fashionable, garbed in a puffy white sundress. Though she's made her way up in society, she is still the scrappy girl of London's back alleys at heart. And finally, in perhaps her most iconic rendering, we find Emma in The Spinstress. Painted in 1784, 2 years into their working partnership, here Romney and Emma have crafted an inside joke onto canvas. We find Emma seated at a spinning wheel, peeping at us from over her shoulder. She is situated in a rural setting, a white hen clucking past her feet. What at first glance might seem like a portrait of domesticity, it actually is full of absurdities. To start, Emma's dress, a skin-tight white sundress, is not at all what a woman spinning yarn would wear. The way that Emma's fingers gently pull on the suggestively shaped yarn gives an erotic undertone. Here, Romney is poking fun at Greville's attempt to turn the young and undeniably sexy Emma into a country matron. Despite Greville's efforts, Emma's wild spirit can never be tamed. Romney's paintings of Emma received a tremendous amount of attention and praise. Emma became the star of Romney's studio, and eager visitors hoped to catch a glimpse of Romney's favorite model. Their working relationship was so prodigious that Romney eventually painted Emma more than 200 times, making her the most painted woman in all of Europe, even above Queen Victoria. Unfortunately, many of these paintings have since been lost or destroyed, and only a fraction of their large portfolio exists today. With their success, Emma's image was reproduced through prints and even on household items like cups and screens. Men across England fantasized about her, and women zealously copied her outfits. She had become a national icon, and thanks to Romney's ardent interest in Emma, other prominent painters like Joshua Reynolds and Thomas Lawrence begged to have England's most beloved model sit for them as well. By 1784, Emma had become the hottest model in all of Europe. Many speculated that Emma and Romney were more than just artist and muse. Over time, rumors spread that the two were lovers. Though untrue, gossipers weren't wrong to assume that there was more than just a friendly air between the pair. There is no doubt that Romney became wholly consumed with infatuation with Emma. His paintings alone are evidence enough to back his obsession with her. Romney fell in love with not only Emma's immense beauty, but also her thirst for life, boundless energy, and warm sense of humor. He knew that Emma's ability to read his needs as an artist was extremely rare, and felt that she understood him better than anyone else had ever been able to before. But despite his burning passion, Romney had enough respect for Emma and their working relationship to restrain himself. And though Emma loved Romney deeply as collaborator and friend, his romantic feelings were unrequited. She knew that her life depended on the support of Greville, and would not risk his protection for another man. Instead, Emma appreciated Romney as a companion and confidant, someone she could be her full self with and open up to. In a letter to Romney, Emma wrote, "You was the first dear friend I opened my heart to." And we can feel this emotional intimacy in Romney's portraits of her. Though not romantic, Emma's relationship with Romney was one of deep love and respect, and was immensely important to her. Yet the longer their relationship remained platonic, the greater Romney's desires grew. In fact, Romney's unshakable feelings for Emma only strengthened over the course of his life, and he continued to fill countless sketchbooks and canvases with Emma's image long after her move from London. In a later letter to Emma, Romney wrote, "I have had a great number of ladies of fashion sitting to me since you left England, but they all fall short of the spinstress. Indeed, you are the sun of my hemisphere, and they are but twinkling stars." Though Emma did not have a wandering eye for Romney, she would soon meet a man that sparked a crush. In the summer of 1783, Greville's uncle, Sir William Hamilton, was visiting England from Naples. He had been living in Naples as a British ambassador to the Neapolitan court and was coming to London to organize the affairs of his recently deceased wife. Greville had spoken at length to Emma about his uncle, but she was not at all prepared to be swept off her feet. At age 55, Emma was expecting to be greeted by an elderly man, and was shocked to instead find before her a tall, fit, handsome man full of jokes and with a zest for life. Upon their first meeting, Sir William gave Emma a long and sincere kiss on her hand, and to her delight, her body instantly lit up with desire. It is no surprise that Sir William was immediately attracted to Emma as well. He began visiting Emma every day to spend time with her. He was enchanted by her beauty and endeared by her eagerness to learn from him. Emma, who had long grown bored of being cooped up in her country home, became enthralled with Sir William's tales from abroad. During his visits, she would sing for him and serve him freshly baked cakes. Their relationship quickly turned flirtatious, giggling and teasing each other like two teenagers in love. Greville, who had to leave for a prolonged business trip, did not realize that his mistress and uncle were becoming closer and closer, right under his nose. Knowing that his time in London was temporary, Sir William commissioned a portrait of Emma by famed artist Joshua Reynolds, so that he could always treasure their time together. He wanted Emma to be painted as Bacchante, an ancient priestess associated with Bacchus. But he was unhappy with Reynolds' work, and instead turned to the artist who knew Emma best, George Romney. Commissioned in 1784, we find Emma in Romney's Lady Hamilton as Bacchante. Here Emma giggles at us seductively over her shoulder. Her flowing peach dress is caught in an upward breeze, revealing her left bosom. Emma vibrates with life, highlighted by her crimson cheeks, playful smile, and energetic stance. You can almost feel her warm breath, hear her buoyant laugh, and touch her flowing hair. A dog stares adoringly up at her in an act of affection. Looking at the painting, it is no surprise that both the man who commissioned the work and the artist who painted it stared at Emma with the same adoration in their eyes. The portrait is nothing short of scandalous, and it's clear that Sir William wished to capture their flirtatious relationship on canvas. As Sir William packed his painting of Emma in preparation for his return to Naples, he did not think that he would see Emma in the flesh again. He appreciated Emma as a passing flirtation and the perfect distraction to ease his grief of his late wife. Little did he and Emma know that Greville would soon surmise a plan that would unite them again and forever change the course of all of their lives. By 1785, Greville had to more seriously start planning his future. As much as he cared for Emma, he knew that the surest road to financial security was to marry a woman from a wealthy and respectable family. He had never planned to have a long-term mistress, and though he was committed to Emma's happiness, he could not commit as her protector for much longer. He needed to figure out a way to both assure Emma's security, but also rid himself of his responsibility to take care of her. In short, he needed to pass her into the care of a trusted party, and he could think of no one better than the widowed Sir William. Greville set out to put his plan into action. To Greville, it seemed like a win-win for everyone. Emma would remain taken care of, Greville would relieve himself as Emma's protector, and Sir William would have a beautiful young woman to spend his days with. He began to write Sir William with the proposal. When Sir William hesitated, Greville took to every tactic in the book: guilt-tripping, bribery, manipulation, and begging. Knowing that Emma was kept in the dark, Sir William's biggest concern was that Emma's heart was with Greville and not him. As he wrote to Greville, "I would take her most readily. I really love her and think better of her than anyone in her situation. Her exquisite beauty had frequently its effects on me. However, there is a great difference between her being with you or me, for she really loves you, when she could only esteem and shudder me. I see so many difficulties in her coming here." Eventually, Greville, in a last-ditch effort, suggested that Sir William take Emma for a few months, as a trial period of sorts. Greville knew that he had no plans to retrieve Emma should it not work out, but it was enough to ease Sir William's concerns, and he cautiously agreed. Deceiving Emma, Greville told her that he needed to travel to Scotland for 6 months on business, and that he was sending her to Naples so that Sir William could look after her while he was away. Always quick to obey Greville, Emma innocently agreed. Knowing that she was leaving soon, Emma modeled for as many paintings by Romney as she could, sitting for him 14 times in a period of 3 months. Romney, who suspected Greville may be sending Emma away for good, hurriedly sketched studies of her, so as never to forget his favorite model and muse. And so, on March 13th, 1766, Emma set off for Naples, Italy. Luckily, Greville agreed to have Emma's mother accompany her on the voyage. It was an extensive trip. But finally, after 6 weeks of travel, Emma arrived in Naples on her 21st birthday. How did Emma feel as she first stepped foot in such a foreign land? Was she overwhelmed by unknown sights, smells, and sounds? Did she miss Greville already? With Mount Vesuvius smoking in the distance, was Emma worried that her life could also erupt at any moment? We get a sense of Emma's experience from a letter she wrote to Greville just after her arrival. As she wrote, "You have sent me to a strange place. You don't know how glad I was to arrive here the day I did, as it was my birthday, and I was very low-spirited. Oh God, that day that you used to smile at me and stay at home and be kind to me. Then that day that I should be at such a distance. But my comfort is that I shall rely on your promise, and September or October I shall see you." It seems that Emma still hadn't an inkling that Greville had sent her to this strange place for good. Sir William happily welcomed Emma into his villa. He prepared an impressive ground floor suite for her to stay in with her mother. As soon as he laid eyes on her again, Sir William was just as smitten with Emma as he had been in London. He took all of his meals with her, gave her tours of the city, and devoted himself to making her feel comfortable. But despite his generous hospitality, Emma missed Greville more and more each day, and grew desperate for him to retrieve her. She sent him letter after letter begging him to come and get her. In one such letter, Emma pleaded, I am sure to cry the moment I think of you, for I feel more and more unhappy at being separated from you. And if my total ruin depends on seeing you, I will and must at the end of the summer. For to live without you is impossible. I love you to the degree that at this time there is not a hardship on earth, poverty, hunger, cold, death, or even to walk barefooted to Scotland to see you. Therefore, my dear, dear Greville, if you do love me, for God's sake and for my sake, try all you can to come here as soon as possible. Emma, despite her distress, never faltered in her trust for Greville. Sir William, who after a few weeks knew that Greville had no intentions to collect Emma, couldn't bear for her to be kept in the dark any longer. He eventually admitted to Emma that Greville had deceived her, and that she was not to return to England or to Greville for the foreseeable future. Despite Sir William's promises to take good care of Emma, her heart felt broken in two. She had always remained loyal to Greville and appeased his every demand. She could not believe that he would now abandon her in a foreign country, away from everyone she knew. Believing that her time in Naples was temporary, Emma hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye to her own daughter. She shut herself in her room for days, refusing food and crying herself to sleep. She angrily wrote to Greville, "I will not venture myself now to write any more, for my mind and heart are so torn by different passions that I shall go mad." Emma had lost her home country, her protector and love, and access to her only daughter within the blink of an eye. Recoiling from betrayal, Emma must have felt that all hope was lost. Little did she know, great adventures, everlasting love, and even more fame than she could ever imagine was just on the horizon, and that really, her life had only just begun. I hope you have enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part episode on Lady Emma Hamilton. We will finish Emma's story and honor her immense legacy in part 2 of this episode. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.